breakfast and positioned himself
Hopped
by
over. Hopped over.
and, and he just jumped in the conversation like nothing happened. He's like 10 minutes late into the panel. And as I mentioned
Yes.
before we started recording, Adam Schiff was recording his session upstairs or doing his session upstairs. But you felt very comfortable. Did you have a life as a writer before you met Jervey?
I did. I was a literary major in college
Mm.
and always had this secret literary dream. I wrote blogs. I contributed to some magazines. So I was sort of a writer before I met Jervey. Obviously not as well published as he was.
Mm. Well, we'll tell everyone about him. I want to let Lev ask some questions, but you can introduce him to Lev.
Yes. So my husband, Jervey Tervalon, is a very, very well accomplished novelist and poet. He had 6 published novels and 2 anthologies. He's one of my favorite books from him is called Dead Above Ground. It's a fiction loosely based on his family's history from New Orleans. And he has another book called Monster Chef, another fiction. And a couple of his novels were on the LA Times bestseller list. He's very renowned for writing urban Norse and writing. A lot of his writing is based on this urban setting of New Orleans. That's where he's originally from. His family moved to LA when he was 5 years old. So he grew up in the Crenshaw area in Los Angeles, but always a very proud New Orleans son and makes great gumbo and biscuit, and a great person. In addition to his writing career, Jervey and Jonathan Gold and Larry Wilson started this literary festival called Lit Fest Pasadena, I think around 12 or 13 years ago. It is the most diverse literary festival in California and the second largest, right after the LA Times Book Festival. It's shifted location the last couple of years to Altadena. Um, so it's called Lit Fest in the Dinas right now. But it's still going on. It's very vibrant. It's on Mother's Day weekend every year. Um, on top of that, he's also a teacher and educator. He's taught at UC Santa Barbara for the last 30 plus years. He also taught at Loyola before and USC before.
That's great, and I know that Danelle's had a long-standing relationship with Jervey. I guess Danelle, you were included in one of his anthologies. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But can you share with us why Jervey's not with us today? Because I know Danelle and I had been in touch with him a little while ago. I think it was maybe shortly after the fires. Um, but if you can kind of shed a little bit of light on his condition now and why we get to talk to you.
Yeah, so he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 3 years ago. He's physically still here, but his cognition has been compromised by his medical conditions. It's been a tough journey, but Alzheimer's is a fairly common disease now that people are living longer. A lot of seniors are diagnosed. He's definitely on the younger end of Alzheimer's. Yeah.
And so, that's a rough thing to do, and so there's some caretaking involved, I imagine. But and then what are you doing now? You work with the Lit Fest. I'm asking just because you know we like telling local stories and knowing what you're doing in the community and such. Would you know?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for asking. So I do have a corporate job. I work in consumer insights and analytics. That's what pays our bills mostly. And on top of that, I'm a runner and I'm a writer myself. Right now I publish a lot on my own, on my Substack. I used to write a lot for Outside Magazine, Women's Running Magazine, Runner's World. I've also been published by Lonely Planet. Not my full-time job. It's definitely a passion.
Mm.
writing about running that's what the bulk of your writing is.
Yes,
And
I would
and
say 90% about my running life and 10% essays, and I just started writing about caregiving as well.
Well,
interesting.
I
So
hope we can come back to well, caregiving, obviously, but I mean, I don't want to ignore the elephant in the room. This all was happening as your home was burning. I mean, these are coinciding events. Can you tell us everything that you can about that?
Yes, yes. 2025 was a really tough year. So Jervey was first diagnosed about 3 years ago. Um, and at first, the symptoms manifested themselves as inattention. He was just not paying attention, and I didn't take it that seriously. But eventually, he had a diagnosis of mild cognitive decline due to Alzheimer's. It was fairly mild. He's taken all kinds of different cognition tests, and his scores were a lot lower than people his age and education level. And then it keeps on going down. On January 7th, 2025, we got a lot of alerts from friends, mostly about a fire that was burning in our area called the Eaton fire. And at first, we didn't take it that seriously. Um, there was no official government alert to say, hey, you need to evacuate. So we didn't, but at our friends' urges, we decided to evacuate. The smoke was getting a little too much, but we also didn't anticipate the fire to burn so quickly. So we just packed some documents and clothing, and we left for a friend's house in Tahunga. And the next morning, my son and I drove two separate cars to go back and check on the house. That morning, the fire was still burning, and most of the streets were just blocked. There was no way to get back to the house. So I actually parked on a gas station nearby our old house, and for some reason, my son was able to get to the house, and he kept on. So after I parked the car, I started walking uphill to go to the house, and it was completely dark. It was around 8 a.m. in the morning, but because of the smoke and ashes, it felt like midnight. Everything was dark. It was raining ashes. You couldn't breathe. I had a little scarf in the glove compartment, so I put that on. It was hellscape. But my son found me walking, and he's like, "Mom, hop in the car." So I hopped in his car, and he said, "Mom, the house is gone." And I could not believe it. He said the entire street was gone. It was even hard for him to recognize the street because all the houses were gone. So it's been almost a year. Wednesday will be the 1 year anniversary. After the fire, there was a huge, huge cognitive decline of Jervey. In the past, it was more of a, slow trickle of a decline. He could still recognize people, places. He would have like occasional hallucinations, like thinking he was in Santa Barbara when he was at home in Altadena. After the fire, the hallucination became frequent. It's pretty much every day. It would manifest itself as like he's always packing. He's always packing up his stuff, saying, "Hey, we should go home. What time are we leaving?" A lot of times he would call me or text me when I'm just around him because he would not recognize who I am. He has a hard time walking at night. His mobility and also sense of balance is also going down. Like walking off a curb at night is extremely difficult. He's tripped many times. Now I know better to hold his hand and make sure he walks, and even avoid walking at night. But yeah, both physically and cognitively, there was a huge visible decline.
Yeah.
just imagine, there's this feeling of being untethered, right? Because his home is kind of what's
Oh,
anchoring him in
absolutely.
reality. That disappears, and then it's just untethered balloon almost.
Yes. Yeah. So with a condition like Alzheimer's, one of the best things you can do is to have a very set routine. And that routine was absolutely disrupted by the fire. And that's one of the reasons he's even more disoriented.
Mhm. You know,
Yeah.
I always think about Altadena as representing something if you're Black in LA, especially if you're from South Central, and
Yes.
just to be able to
Yes.
live there is something. I I used to take my kids up there to the park, you know, the big park at the bottom of the hill, or yeah, with the amphitheater and all that. And it felt
Yes.
like no place in California, and I'd say probably no place in America, you know, just that sense of a community that's small and out of the way. Most people have never been there, you know. I did a literary
Yeah.
festival there in 2003, and people, it
Mm-hmm.
was at the top of the hill. People literally didn't come because they couldn't believe it was so far up there, you know. And so I just
Yeah.
wondered for if Jervey experienced that loss in a way that was really specific to him as an Angelino, as a Black man in Angelino?
Absolutely. So when the fire first happened, he did get interviewed by both the LA Times and the New York Times on, what this means for Black Altadenians. He had some good quotes there. Um, when we got married and when I moved into the house, that's back in 2013, I did not know the history of Altadena that well. And it was Jervey that told me the history of Altadena. North above Woodbury and Fair Oaks, that's where Black people were allowed to purchase property. And in quote unquote proper Pasadena, Black people were not allowed. It's the very typical redlining. Um, Therefore, Altadena is a lot more diverse. You have a lot more black people. I think the Black home ownership is 10 times the average of
Mm,
overall American Black home ownership. And, a lot of for these Black folks, the homes are already paid off, which brings another issue. A lot of them are either underinsured or uninsured. So the fire really uprooted a whole community, and especially the Black community.
mm.
Yeah.
What's going on there now in terms of rebuilding or whatnot? What's the status or
Yes, I don't have the latest data, but if you just drive through the streets, we did that a couple weeks ago. Um, Eyeballing maybe 10 to 20% rebuilding. Um, I've read other resources where it's like different, like Paradise, California, the rebuild rate is around 40%. Right now, we don't have a accurate number yet. I mean, a year in, people are still like getting their rebuild permits. Still, we had a little delay on our debris removal. We also had a fence put over the property, but we haven't started the rebuilding process yet. I do have quotes from contractors and architects, but I haven't started the rebuilding process yet.
Mm. God, you mentioned Paradise, and I just got a chill. I my ex-wife worked at the Paradise Post, and
Oh,
my cat died in Paradise. My cat
oh, I'm so
Drexler
sorry.
died in Paradise. Just a
Ugh.
strange aside, because that's a town that just went the same route, just gone, right? I don't know if they
Yeah.
rebuilt Paradise. I have to ask you, this is answer it as much as you want to. What's it like trying to get someone who's going through cognitive decline through an experience like a fire like that? How did you
Oh,
handle
it's
it?
very ooh. It's very tough. It's very tough. The fire thing is something you can move on.
Mhm,
You move to a different place, you try to print out old photos, you redecorate your new place, you make it, you rebuild your routine, you change your commute, you do all those to create a sense of normalcy.
mm,
But with Alzheimer's, it's really, I call it the longest goodbye. You have someone who you see day in and day out, and they're declining right in front of you. And it's extremely sad.
mm,
I've read a lot of caregiving books. It, I think, for about 2 years or even longer, I was in a fighting mode. It was really, really hard to admit to myself that this person in front of me is gone, that I need to really make a pivot from being his wife to his caregiver. That so far has been the hardest transition I've made. I've made other transitions in my life. I was a single mom before I met Jervey. There was definitely a transition there. But this is so far the most challenging, is letting go all your expectations. This person is no longer your spouse. You can't just call up at this person and say, hey, can you go pick up the kid? Nope. They can't drive. Jervey cannot drive anymore. You can't say, hey, can you go to a grocery store and get me the list of things? They can't. I used to have a board with every day's schedule, our daughter Colette's schedule mapped out, my work schedule, different stuff. He would look at the board, but he would not comprehend. So I realized, oh, that's not even working. So why bother? Those daily things are just reminders. I have to really accept my role shift in order to embrace the condition. Once I had that shifted, it becomes a little easier from my perspective of just handling this. Now the challenging things become, taking care of the whole household essentially on my own and figuring out my child care because Jervey no longer drives, making, doing things for him, making his doctor's appointment, following up, coordinating with his ex-wife Gina to say, oh, who's taking him for these managing his medications, talking to his doctors about his anxiety,
Mm.
all those things. Yeah.
I think of you as someone, I mean, this is from Jervey's characterization, as being an ambitious person in your own right. That's why it's just hard for me to imagine you making the transition. I hope that's not
it
offensive to bear.
it was extremely hard. It was extremely hard. Because a lot of times I read this book a while ago. The book describes how like we forget that they forget because this person is still in front of you. A lot of times I still get frustrated. Like, how can you do X, Y, and Z? Just a couple days ago, my landlord was complaining how people were throwing baby wipes and toilet paper towels, kitchen towels in the toilet. And it took me a while to realize he was the one that's doing it. And I got frustrated because the landlord was going to give us the plumbing bill. Those are the little things that, I have to let go and say, this person's not doing it on intention. He has a illness that he has to deal with. There's also a medical term that I recently learned. It's called anosognosia. So the word just means that you don't, because of your cognitive issues, you literally don't have an insight into your own mind, that you're unaware that you have Alzheimer's or bipolar or some other psychotic diseases. Um, and for a long time, I thought he was in active denial. After learning about this, I was like, okay, I understand now. He really doesn't know that he has Alzheimer's.
Can I ask? I don't know if this is going to be a totally coherent question, but I was curious a little bit earlier about you write about running and stuff, and I'm obviously not a runner, um, but I mean if you had the full body shot, you might know that. But I imagine and but what I've but I'm a walker and a hiker and I like that and I like being in my head and having my thoughts. And then and I haven't read much of like writing by runners or about running.
Mm,
So I wonder like what do you draw from that? Like is that like a meditative experience for you? What do you draw from that that kind of helps you deal with the fire, helps you deal with the caretaking and kind of, I mean, running is probably an everyday part of your life. So I'm just kind of wondering like that. What is that reality like for you? Has it affected your writing or your thoughts about running, or has running helped you
yeah.
figure out this other path out?
Yeah. Running has been my self-care for the last, 18 plus years.
Wow.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
it's you know, when I was younger, when I was, you know, essentially a single mom with Sam, that was how I picked up my confidence. And now it's a way of building resilience and taking time for myself. You know, it's the time of the day I don't have to think about my to-do list. I can run, I can get in my own head or not think about anything. I can listen to music, I can run with friends and just chit chat and talk about silly stuff, running races, fun stuff. You know, preparing for races, it's fun for me.
Mm,
I no longer have the capacity to train for a full marathon. I can't, you know, go on for a 20-mile long run and then come home and take Colette to different places. It's challenging. Training for a marathon requires a lot of recovery time too. I don't have that, but I train for short distances. That's a lot of fun for me. So it's really a form of self-care and my source of strength and also inspiration. The running community is full of people doing incredibly amazing things. You know, I
mm,
have friends who run ultra marathons, 240 plus miles. I have friends who could do back to back marathons at a really fast time in their 60s, 70s. I have friends who, you know, have world records for their age groups. And doing this all while they have a job, they have their